To understand our nature, history and psychology, we must get inside the heads of our hunter-gatherer ancestors. For nearly the entire history of our species, sapiens lived as searching for food. Like today's wild animals, we used to be foragers before agricultural revolution. Even today, scholars claim, our brains and minds are adapted to a life of hunting and gathering. Our eating habits, our conflicts and our sexuality are all the result of the way our hunter-gatherer minds interact with our current post-industrial environment, with its mega-cities, aeroplanes, telephones and computers. For example, why do people have bad habit of greedily eating high-calorie food that is doing little good to their bodies? It's a puzzle why we binge on the sweetest and greasiest food we can find, until we consider the eating habits of our forager ancestor. In the savannas and forests they inhabited, high-calorie sweets were extremely rare and food in general was in short supply. A typical forager 30,000 years ago had access to only one type of sweet food, ripe fruit. If a Stone Age woman came across a tree groaning with figs, the most sensible thing to do was to eat as many of them as she could on the spot, before the local baboon band comes. Today we may be living in high-rise apartments with overstuffed refrigerators, but our DNA still thinks we are in the savannah. That's what makes us spoon down an entire tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream when we find one in the freezer and wash it down with a jumbo Coke. This greedily eating gene theory is widely accepted. Other theories are far more controversial. For example, some evolutionary psychologists argue that in ancient foraging bands, a woman could have sex and form intimate bonds with several men and women simultaneously, and all of the band's adults cooperated in parenting its children. Since no man knew definitively which of the children were his, men showed equal concern for all youngsters. Such a social structure is well documented among animals, notably our closest relatives, the chimpanzees and bonobos. There are even a number of present-day human cultures in which collective fatherhood is practiced, as for example among the Bari Indians. According to the beliefs of such societies, a child is not born from the sperm of a single man, but from the accumulation of sperm in a woman's womb. A good mother will make a point of having sex with several different men, especially when she is pregnant, so that her child will enjoy the qualities and paternal care, not merely of the best hunter, but also of the best storyteller, the strongest warrior and the most considerate lover. If this sounds silly, bear in mind that after modern studies on embryology, people have solid proof that in history babies were always sired from many fathers instead of single father. Now, let's see early humans' nature towards their pets and how do we relate to this. The dog was the first animal domesticated by Homo sapiens, and this occurred before the agricultural revolution. Experts disagree about the exact date, but we have incontrovertible evidence of domesticated dogs from about 15,000 years ago. They may have joined the human pack thousands of years earlier. Dogs were used for hunting and fighting, and as an alarm system against wild beasts and human intruders. With the passing of generations, the two species co-evolved to communicate well with each other. Dogs that were most attentive to the needs and feelings of their human companions got extra care and food, and were more likely to survive. Simultaneously, dogs learned to manipulate people for their own needs. A 15,000-year bond has yielded a much deeper understanding and affection between humans and dogs than between humans and any other animal. In some cases, dead dogs were even buried ceremoniously, much like humans. A 12,000-year-old tomb found in northern Israel. It contains the skeleton of a 50-year-old woman next to that of a puppy, upper left corner. The puppy was buried close to the woman's head. Her left hand is resting on the dog in a way that might indicate an emotional connection. There are, of course, other possible explanations. Perhaps, for example, the puppy was a gift to the gatekeeper of the next world. Please subscribe to the channel for more content like this. There is no doubt that early humans were more skillful people. Today, most people in industrial societies don't need to know much about the natural world in order to survive. What do you really need to know in order to get by as a computer engineer, an insurance agent, a history teacher, or a factory worker? You need to know a lot about your own tiny field of expertise. But for the vast majority of life's necessities, you rely blindly on the help of other experts, whose own knowledge is also limited to a tiny field of expertise. The human collective knows far more today than did the ancient bands. But at the individual level, ancient foragers were the most knowledgeable and skillful people in history. Survival in that era required superb mental abilities from everyone. Foragers mastered not only the surrounding world of animals, plants, and objects, but also the internal world of their own bodies and senses. They listened to the slightest movement in the grass to learn whether a snake might be lurking there. They carefully observed the foliage of trees in order to discover fruits, beehives, and bird nests. They moved with a minimum of effort and noise, and knew how to sit, walk, and run in the most agile and efficient manner. Varied and constant use of their bodies made them as fit as marathon runners. They had physical dexterity that people today are unable to achieve even after years of practicing yoga or tai chi. The foragers' secret of success, which protected them from starvation and malnutrition, was their varied diet. For example, farmers tend to eat a very limited and unbalanced diet. Especially in pre-modern times, most of the calories feeding an agricultural population came from a single crop, such as wheat, potatoes, or rice, that lacks some of the vitamins, minerals, and other nutritional materials humans need. The typical factory worker in traditional China ate rice for breakfast, rice for lunch, and rice for dinner. If she were lucky, she could expect to eat the same on the following day. By contrast, ancient foragers regularly ate dozens of different foodstuffs. The factory worker's ancient ancestor, the forager, may have eaten berries and mushrooms for breakfast, fruits, snails, and turtle for lunch, and rabbit steak with wild onions for dinner. Tomorrow's menu might have been completely different. This variety ensured that the ancient foragers received all the necessary nutrients. Also, the forager economy provided most people with more interesting lives than agriculture or industry do. For example, today, a Chinese factory working leaves home around 7 in the morning, makes her way through polluted streets to a sweatshop, and there operates the same machine, in the same way, day in, day out, for 10 long and mind-numbing hours, returning home around 7 in the evening in order to wash dishes and do the laundry. 30,000 years ago, a Chinese forager might leave camp with her companions, 8 in the morning. They'd roam the nearby forests and meadows, gathering mushrooms, digging up edible roots, catching frogs, and occasionally running away from tigers. By early afternoon, they were back at the camp to make lunch. That left them plenty of time to gossip, tell stories, play with the children, and just hang out. Of course, the tigers sometimes caught them, or a snake bit them. But on the other hand, they didn't have to deal with today's automobile accidents and industrial pollution. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.